Yes, it's a great pleasure to speak to you from the beautiful British Virgin Islands in the Eastern Caribbean Sea. We're a small place in terms of people, only 35,000 people, many more sailboats than people, 2,000 of those, but many more companies than people or sailboats, about 400,000 companies holding a not inconsiderable proportion of the world's offshore wealth. COVID-19 introduced itself to the Virgin Islands in March of this year when we had the first of 7 cases discovered. We only had one hospitalization, and tragically the lady from, I believe, the Philippines, who was an immigrant, she passed away in hospital here. But since the end of April, we've had no cases because our government has been very rigorous in shutting entries into the territory down completely, and even trying to exit the territory has been shut down. There's no boating allowed in the waters, so people can't be secretly put into the islands. And by shutting down entry into the BVI, it has gone a long way to stop the virus here. Also, we were all locked down in our homes for about a month and a half. So through this process, we're clean of the virus, touch wood. Our economy is about 60% related to financial services, offshore companies, litigation associated with the companies, and that industry continues to go on despite the pandemic. So our government's revenue is still okay as to 60% of cash flowing into the treasury. We hope to open up some of the tourism trade soon, like September, by allowing people to go to the airport, get screened for the COVID preliminarily, and then taken in a secured way to a catamaran or charter fleet of boats. In other words, most of our tourism revenue comes from catamarans and their charter. And once you're out in the water, it's pretty hard to communicate the virus. So we should be able to revive at least half of our tourism economy through that device. As for our work, I'm a fraud and asset recovery lawyer, and we have work spanning the globe. The cases continue, notwithstanding some administrative difficulties. In the main, most of our hearings here and abroad are being done on secured Zoom, WebEx calls, video conferencing. We're finding that the judges find that this is quite an efficient way of dealing with the kinds of applications we bring as fraud recovery lawyers, namely disclosure orders of a secret nature, secret asset freezing application hearings that last 1 or 2 or 3 hours of duration, and the judge decides whether to allow us to get access to records of a bank account or an offshore company to prove a case theory that the target is behind one of these items, or to allow us to actually appoint a receiver or a liquidator or freeze some assets. That activity is still going on. We also find that we're getting more cases and more work as the days go by, because whenever there's economic dislocation and cash flows are tightened and constricted, some businesses fail, and the reason for failure can be benign or innocent in terms of the explanation for why a business collapsed in the current crisis, or can be quite dark, where the managers were able to conceal a fraud that may be running for many years, and now that the cash flows are being constricted and access to capital is being constricted, the frauds are getting discovered. So we've had 3 very large cases. One, a savage and brutal $80 million maritime fraud, one of the worst frauds I've ever seen in terms of the depths of depravity by the other side, multiple occasions of forging documents to demolish our clients' loan security on 13 ocean-going vessels. we've seen some investment frauds, and I guess the garden variety of Ponzi scheme that we see in our work. So I think that if anyone is involved in law enforcement, economic crime, or in the private sector asset recovery, or for private sector victims or public sector clients, I think we're going to see a continued expansion of work needed to be done with very compelling and important cases. One case I'm working on now is we're acting for Nissan Motor Company in Japan against Carlos Ghosn, the famous former CEO and chairman of Nissan, who fled Japan to Lebanon to avoid extradition, who, by the way, is a Brazilian national as well as Lebanese and French. He is now in Lebanon, and we're in litigation with him here in the BVI and elsewhere. So that's basically it. That's the current position in the BVI. Well, my opinion is you strike as fast as you can. One journalist contacted me from the Seattle Times because she's investigating hundreds of millions of dollars, I think $600 million stolen from the unemployment insurance benefit scheme in the state of Washington, where Seattle is. So these kinds of public sector frauds are exploding. Whenever you have a pressure on government to release large sums of money to prop up the economy or to help people, a lot of the checks and balances in the system designed to ameliorate or manage the risk of fraud get set aside because speed is more important than risk management right now. People are desperate for money, and the politicians want to get it out to the people. And in that environment, fraudsters just love it because it's prime ground, hunting ground for them to steal value from the public purse and to deprive money going to the honest people who are entitled to support and business people. So I think law enforcement should set up a task force in Brazil urgently, specifically designed to detect areas of high risk in the release of cash by the state in order to try and enhance the economy and to make it go forward. I have a little brother who's the premier of the province of Alberta in Canada, and he's facing the same issues in Alberta, where they're releasing huge amounts of money to prop up the economy and infrastructure spending and social support to people. And he is going through the very same issue as government has to be going through in Brazil. And that means you have to partner with law enforcement, and someone in leadership in law enforcement needs to take action, put resources in to identify the risks and attack the problems now and not to wait.